Here's an example. An instructor who takes off 50% for lateness, which I've seen many times over my career, is defining professionalism strictly in terms of being on time, and is also weighing professionalism equally to the mastery of course content. Now that's a big penalty if professionalism isn't the main purpose of the course or even stated as one of the learning outcomes, which it almost never is. If the professor is also piling on penalties for formatting, style, etc., all under the umbrella of professionalism, that means professionalism weighs even more than course mastery. So consider this example in a writing class. If I have a 100-point research paper with the following evaluative criteria: the quality of the research, using valid sources, seminal studies, recent literature, etc., the soundness of the argument made in the paper, the support of that argument, how well the research is used and integrated into forming the conclusion, the level of writing, consideration of audience, style, its usage, and so on. And for the sake of argument, let's toss in professionalism and say, sure, we put that in as a learning outcome of our course. Then that would include things like formatting, timeliness, following the stated guidelines, and so on. So how would you rate the importance of each item? Would we say that 50% is professionalism? If we divide the remaining points between the other four categories, this means that none of these is worth more than 12.5% of the total grade. Let's say this is a writing class. Is the quality of the writing less important learning outcome than whether or not they turned it in on time? If it's a research-oriented class, the research elements combined are still only 37.5% of the total, and combined there's still less value than professionalism, which again may not even have been stated as an outcome or used in the actual grading formula. But if you took off 50% for lateness, that's exactly what you've done. You've made that the sole criteria that is valued far more than any other criteria that you're using to evaluate that work. And even those that cling to the argument that it is a learning outcome and not convenience can show no evidence that this policy encourages habits that go beyond the confines of the classroom. Turning in a paper on time to avoid a late penalty doesn't necessarily lead to someone learning to show up on time to their clinical rotation. If it does, I'd sure like to see the study that demonstrates that link. I've also heard the fairness argument. The late learner had 24 hours more to work on the paper, so it isn't fair to learners who might have done a better job if they'd had another day to work on their work. But there's a certain logic in that argument. But I can tell you, I've been teaching a really long time, and I know that learners who are turning in work late are not spending extra time on the assignment. In fact, they usually are spending less time than those who got the work in on time. They're rushing the project together at the last minute. They're not using the time to perfect the work. These are normally struggling learners who can ill afford the loss of credit. Or the other situation is normally someone who just couldn't get it in on time because of outside circumstances that are often beyond their control. So if you do accept the work, you have an obligation to give it the grade it earned, in my opinion, period.